give you all, you've heard the powerful science of what is happening, and now is the kind of boring details of what you all as a group, as members of our Climate Council and working groups, are going to do. Actually, before I start, I also wanted to recognize Phil Bartlett, the head of Maine's PUC, as well as I saw Barry Hobbins out there, Maine's public advocate. Two important energy leaders are here. We also had leaders from Senator Collins' office, Mark Winters, Rihanna from Shelley Pingree's office, as well as Adam Lockman from Governor King's office. So we really appreciate our federal delegation. So Jerry and I are just going to run through the Climate Council quick PowerPoint to give you the overview, and then we're going to hand it off to the governor, who will be here in just a couple minutes. So you've heard it already. We're the co-chairs, which really just means we're going to try to wrangle you all as much as possible. So just quick grounding for what Governor Mills has already done in her first couple months in office. We joined the U.S. Climate Alliance, which is a bipartisan coalition of 25 states committed to meeting the Paris climate goals, which is 26 to 28% emission reductions by 2025. As you will see, Maine is already on the way to meet those goals. The Climate Alliance represents 55% of the U.S. population. It has huge states like Colorado, California, New York involved. So we've already learned a lot from joining with these other states. We've launched electric vehicle rebate programs and infrastructure programs using VW money with Efficiency Maine. We're hoping everybody in this room, especially Commissioner Van Note, gets their electric car soon, right? We signed legislation to restore net metering to encourage renewable energy for homeowners and small businesses, ended the blanket ban on wind power development, and withdrew Maine from the Offshore Drilling Coalition. All good stuff. Those were just the little things. This page represents a few of the bigger things that we've been working on with the leadership of Dan Burgess in the Governor's Energy Office, and many of the legislators in this room. Maine went from having a 40% renewable portfolio standard to 80% by 2030, which is one of the most significant in the country. And our goal is to get to 100% renewable energy by 2050. Actually, Phil Bartlett and the PUC are working on rules right now to get this underway. We're encouraging solar with a number of solar bills that passed to encourage both larger scale and smaller scale and community generation. I know many folks have heard about offshore wind. The governor is incredibly committed to making University of Maine's Aqua Ventus project happen, which will be the first floating offshore wind project in the U.S. So when we talk about innovation and how Maine can lead the way, offshore wind is an incredibly important part of that. We are just undertaking a federal BOEM, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management task force with Massachusetts and New Hampshire about what's going to happen in the Gulf of Maine and how we carefully figure out how to do wind, negotiating with fishing interests, making sure the Gulf of Maine can be used by all of us. And last but not least, we have an important heating initiative to install 100,000 new heat pumps in Maine by 2025. This is the beginning of electrification of our heating sector. We've had incredible participation from Maine Housing. This is really the brainchild of the Efficiency Maine Trust and Michael Stoddard. But this is also an initiative that will help Maine homeowners save $300 to $600 a year. So our work has to also be focused on how do we help people be more comfortable in their homes, save money, but also reduce their carbon emissions. I know lots of folks have heard about Executive Order number 10, some great headlines earlier this week. The governor signed an executive order to make Maine carbon neutral by 2045. This Climate Council is tasked with both tracking our progress and also including recommendations on how we can achieve that. That sounds like a little bit of a scary goal, and some people have already started to make light of, the governor, and she's banning all lobster boat engines, blah, blah, blah. Carbon neutrality is, I think for a state like Maine that's 90% forested, a tremendous opportunity. Through our forests, through our fields, there are ways that we are already sequestering carbon. The more we quantify that, it actually can be a way to pay farmers and foresters. So I think we should look to this as an opportunity for Maine. And last, certainly but not least, we passed the Maine Climate Council bill. You can see Senator Woodsum, his beard's looking a little smaller today, sponsored by Senator Woodsum, and that really sets forth the work of this council. We now have reductions in law to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 45% by 2030 and 80% by 2050. It created this council, it advised who should be on it, and it charged us with coming up with a climate action plan by December 1st, 2020. So the two major things we're going to do is figure out how to mitigate carbon emissions, which is reduce them, and then how our state can better adapt. So here are our goals again for mitigation. We are charged with using scientific and technical information, figuring out the feasibility and the cost effectiveness of the solutions that we propose. And then we are also charged with thinking about how this can create good paying jobs for Maine citizens. How do we make sure that this new clean energy economy can benefit Mainers? And I think there's a lot of opportunity there, and that's one of the things that this council is charged with doing. So where are we on mitigation? Where are we on reducing our greenhouse gas emissions? I'm going to hand it off to the expert to tell us.
Okay, so this next slide is part reality and part aspiration. It shows greenhouse gas emission reductions or emissions starting in 1990 through 2015. What you'll see in that kind of bold mountainous area is the peak of emissions in 2005. We plunge below the 1990 baseline in 2010, and then we're on a downward trajectory with a little blip in 2012. Going back up a little bit. And then the balance of that is the glide path towards victory here, where we're going to pick up our work and we're going to make that a reality. And what you can see to the right are some of the emission reduction goals that have been set forth in various places, including the 80% reduction goal for 2050. The next slide is simple but important. It shows both greenhouse gas emission reductions and GDP growth in the same place, and you can see clearly that GDP continues to grow or remain stable while greenhouse gas emissions are being reduced sharply. So that debunks any suggestion that reducing greenhouse gas emissions is incompatible with economic growth. This one is, I think, very interesting and informative given our work here in Maine, because it shows the disproportionate amount of greenhouse gas emissions from the transportation and residential sectors in Maine as compared to other states. So you can see where the working groups will really need to focus their efforts to realize some of the benefits, some of the reductions that we need to bring about.
Wait, just go back to that one. Just if you can't read it, read off what the big chunk is.
The big chunk is transportation at the bottom. And you can see that's 54% in Maine. The U.S. average is 37%. And that's not surprising for a large, sparsely populated state as we have, but it shows you where we need to turn. It's not manufacturing so much, it's not electric generation as it would be in some other states. It's overwhelmingly a transportation issue, and also disproportionately residential emissions are significant in our state. And I should say that these slides will be available if I'm moving too quickly or you want to go revisit them on our forthcoming website.
And your website.
And it's currently available on our website, I believe, at DEP. But the Climate Council will be having its own website soon. Adaptation strategies, these bullets are kind of paraphrased from the statute. I think what's significant to mention here is the legislature really wanted to emphasize that our work prioritized the welfare of Maine citizens. So we can't charge ahead without being mindful of the impact of what we're doing on the citizens of our state, and particularly the most vulnerable populations, whether economically challenged or otherwise marginalized populations. That's throughout the statute. And so we need to continue to bear that in mind as we do our work. And also, as we've mentioned several times today, there's a real emphasis on utilizing the most recent science available and technical information. That's going to be a theme for us. So the timeline, you can see our kickoff meeting today. And between today and October of, or summer of 2020, what we're envisioning is that the working groups will be getting underway, probably meeting every month, scheduled by the co-chairs, and the council will be meeting quarterly. The working groups will be reporting back to the council as to the progress that they're making. And in the summer and fall of 2020, the council itself will be considering and prioritizing the strategies for the action plan that we need to finalize by the end of the year 2020. That plan will then be updated every 4 years thereafter. And after we've done that, the council and the working groups will continue to meet. This is now enshrined in statute, which is very important. And the work at that point will shift to monitoring and adjusting the strategies that have been put in place. And DEP will be reporting on greenhouse gas emissions every 2 years. This is the org chart, which is pretty straightforward, but I think what is worth mentioning is the Science and Technical Subcommittee I don't see it as really having any control over the working groups. They're there as a resource for the working groups. So we're not hierarchical in that sense. They are going to be our scientific advisors. They're a resource for the working groups. They will be advising and informing the council as it considers the recommendations that come before it. Roles and responsibilities. I think that most of this is fairly straightforward. One thing to note, we don't have a lot of perks to offer the council members in terms of like no duffel bags or anything like that, but we are offering council members one complimentary working group that you can choose. So if you haven't done that yet, talk to us and we'll make that arrangement. The steering committee is a group that will consist of the co-chairs of the council together with the co-chairs of the working groups, and that will be a resource to help guide the work of all of us in this effort. Scientific and Technical Committee, as I said, their responsibilities by statute are essentially to identify data gaps and advise all of us on especially methodologies for sequestration, which is going to be important, as Hannah said. The working groups, again, we've gone over some of this. This is where these are the engines of our work, really. The working groups are the laboratories where all the good ideas are going to be formulated and perfected and then presented to the council. So the groups will develop and recommend the mitigation adaptation actions. And I think it's worth noting here, there's an important component to the working group's responsibilities of soliciting stakeholder input. And so the chairs of those working groups will be responsible for coming up with ways that make sense for each working group to solicit input from the public on the work that they're performing. And I think Hannah's going to pick it up from here.
So, here are your co-chairs. Just very quickly, we wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of sort of who's helping to lead these committees. These chairs have big roles. Some of them maybe are now realizing the magnitude of what they just agreed to. Sorry, Judy. Judy's got a long haul from Washington County. But you heard today from our science and technical co-chairs, Ivan Fernandez and Bob Marvini. The Transportation Working Group, Joyce Taylor, the Chief Engineer of the Maine DOT, and Sarah Cushman. Maybe stand up as I announce you co-chairs. Joyce, Sarah's out there somewhere. Ivan, Sarah's in the back corner, Ivan. Bob, Kathleen Layden from Maine Department of Marine Resources, and Heather Leslie from the Darling Center. I know Heather's out there too. I don't believe Dr. Shaw, the head of the Maine CDC, is here, but some of his staff are here, and he's excited to triple co-chair this group with Ann Fuchs from Maine MEMA, as well as Judy East from the Washington County Council of Governments. We've got Michael Stoddard with Buildings, Housing, and Infrastructure, as well as Kathleen Meal from Maine Conservation Voters. The Energy Working Group is going to be co-chaired by Dan Burgess and Ken Coburn. I think Ken couldn't be here, and Dan is trying to shepherd the governor in this direction. And last but certainly not least, the Working Lands, it's actually Natural and Working Lands Group, sorry for the typo, going to be co-chaired by Amanda Beal and Tom Abello. Tom is also working on the governor. So these folks will be, so thank you all. Give them a round of applause. Maybe very quickly also, as I read off, I'm going to read these one at a time. If you think you're on one of these groups, stand up. We're going to do it one at a time. If you're a science and technical person, you've been tapped for that, you think, stand up. These obviously look like the smartest people in the room, so thank you. No offense to the rest of you. Transportation group, stand up. Great. It's a serious looking group, thank you. Coastal and Marine. Thank you all. Pat, you're not, no. He's going to come visit. The Biggest Mouthful group, Community Planning and Resilience, Public Health, and Emergency Management. Stand up. It's the biggest mouthful, and it's maybe also the biggest group. So they're gonna divide and conquer on that one. A lot of important issues. Buildings, infrastructure, and housing. Great. Senator Woodsum's ready for this one. Efficiency. Energy Working Group. Great. Thank you all. Again, last but not least, Natural and Working Lands. Awesome. Including Ruby, our youngest farming member of that group. So again, just a few next steps. We are, as many of you know, we are broadcasting this live. I'm sure that thousands of Maine people have tuned in. We are recording it, and it's going to be available on the DEP website. We have a YouTube site. We have a Twitter feed, a Facebook page. We will soon have a more official website to categorize all of our work. And just to be very clear, our work is public work, and so our working groups and our meetings are open to the public, or at least publicly accessible. We'll try to find bigger rooms for some of the future ones. But again, I do imagine that the public is very interested in this, and we will find ways for people to participate in person and also remotely. Working groups will start meeting monthly, hopefully next month. And as Jerry said, one of our important tasks is also to just make sure Maine people are aware of what we're doing. We're asking for their input, and we imagine doing some of that work through the working groups. We're also going to find other ways to do it online, probably through a couple other larger meetings, but we want to hear from the people of Maine, and we know that hundreds and thousands of them are interested in being a part of this process. So the last thing, you've hopefully, where's Cassie's in the back? Wave, Cassie. She's our climate coordinator and also PhD geologist and technologist. And Sarah Kern over here are kind of our coordinating staffers, as well as Jerry and I. We are here to answer questions and comments. We have an email now that you can also email us questions and comments. We put on here press inquiries if you get them. We ask people if they're going to speak on behalf of the Maine Climate Council, just check in with us. Obviously, you're all independent people who are involved in a lot of things, so don't feel the need to talk to us about everything you're out there doing with the press. But obviously, if it's about the Climate Council, feel free to check in with us so we can all stay on the same page. So with that, I just want to take a couple of minutes just to answer any questions.